to a slide and talk to you about some lessons learned from these secret shopping experiences I had. So first, let me do it from a taxpayer's perspective, because many of you are probably thinking, this is a curious process, this secret shopping, and it is. And what I thought was truly unique was the ability for me as an individual to gain really two perspectives. One, as I mentioned to you, I was a taxpayer. And so I sat, like any other taxpayer, nervous as can be, wanting to make sure I had the information right, that in my case, that nobody figured out I was an IRS agent before they completed my return. But I sat, what I would say, in the bullpen with other taxpayers. And I can tell you, like many of the sites that you were running each and every day, I sat, in some cases, up to 4 hours waiting for my taxes to get done. And so it was a very unique experience as a taxpayer to look at places where I thought the sites and the volunteers could have improved. So let me just go over a couple of those. First and foremost is that each and every taxpayer that I dealt with sitting waiting to get my returns done had extreme confidence in the volunteers. And that's a great thing for all of us to remember. It's a great testament to the training and to the professionalism that each and every volunteer brings to the table at these VITA sites. But in the same token, you'll see it can also be a liability for us, because these taxpayers really totally depend on us. So first, when I talk about confidence in volunteers, one of my great stories was that one site where I waited actually in excess of 4 hours, they asked us multiple times, would any taxpayer be willing to come back or do something different? And each and every time they would ask, all of these taxpayers were willing to wait for hours. And so that, again, shows a sign of the confidence they had in you. The other thing that I noticed, and I hope we'll talk about, and we will in more detail, is that these individual taxpayers came to these sites willing to answer any question, to provide any documentation. I can tell you, even as a taxpayer sitting in the waiting area, they wanted to show me documents when they would ask questions about with each other on, did you know how to answer this question? They'd be very willing to show. So it's one of those things we're going to talk about. We, as volunteers and tax preparers, need to be willing to ask the questions, because the taxpayers have all the answers. Now, the second one was I know many times we who are volunteers, and I also am a volunteer during the filing season myself at a local VITA site. I know as a volunteer I'm always nervous, but I can tell you that all of these taxpayers are extremely nervous about this. This is a big deal to them, obviously, getting their taxes done. They're very hopeful for a refund, but more importantly, they just want to get it done. And so what I learned while working or visiting these sites as a shopper, that we as site coordinators and volunteers can help taxpayers tremendously decrease their nervousness by, at the very beginning, making the site more accessible, if you will, more easy for them to navigate. And one of the places I learned quickly was that sites that have an active greeter, those sites where the taxpayers felt much more at ease, much more comfortable. And so when you're thinking about your site, if there is an individual who was a volunteer in years past but feels like it's too much time for them to get certified, too much time for them to take the classes, but they'd be willing to come and serve as a greeter, that will improve your site dramatically. They can go through documentations, make sure that taxpayers have the information they need, and that will help the volunteer who's doing the return at the end have a much more easy time getting the return done. One of the other things I learned, and again, this is up to you as a site coordinator and volunteer, the places where sites allow the taxpayer to see what was being done, if you will, to sit on the same side as the preparer, those taxpayers seemed much more at ease. They may not have understood exactly what was being done, but by allowing them to see the screen and what was being inputted, in my mind, it really took the veil off some of, if you will, the secrecy of what was doing. So I know that's not plausible in every site, but if it is plausible in your community at your sites, I would highly recommend that. And then last but not least, I want you to recall, and I want it to be something that you remind your volunteers each and every day, that the individuals we're helping are not tax experts. I can tell you, sitting in those bullpens waiting to get the returns done, these taxpayers did not understand the intake sheet, and they were trying their best to answer them, but oftentimes we're trying to, if you will, trying to provide an answer they thought was the correct one, even though it might not have been in their situation. So what I want us as volunteer tax preparers to do is not to rely totally on the intake sheet. It is not a document for us to just take their information at face value and totally input it. We as tax preparers and volunteers need to ask the questions. And so last but not least, one of my little things I thought was the key was the taxpayers do have all the answers, but we must ask them the questions in terms they understand. And I think all of us know that that intake sheet is not, in often cases, in a format that taxpayers understand.